Okay, everyone, well, thanks for joining this evening. It's a little bit different this evening because we're going to go through a little bit behind the no-cal class, but as you'll find out, I'm a total beginner in that aspect, so it's almost you coming along the journey with me in learning. So I've kept my part of it quite basic, but I've already spoken with several of the participants tonight and lined them up. A couple have models, and I'll go to them for their more in-depth advice at that point. But there's a few announcements first of all, but as always, general thing is, if you wish to ask a question, we'll keep them to the end. If you raise your hand in the participant window, or if you don't have audio yourself, if you want to type them in the chat window, then that's fine. As you can probably see, I've got one device up just monitoring the chat window, although forgive me while I'm speaking if I don't keep up with it. And yeah, the only other thing is Roger has started going through all the historic sessions that we have done, and they are slowly but surely being added to the YouTube channel. Once everything, there's greater work to be done with some rather than others, but we're slowly getting there on them. So that'll allow you to go back and see any that you've missed. Roger's going to share the screen for me with the presentation, so we'll go over to that. So first of all, it's some sad news to announce. I'm sure a good number of you know, but Peter Iliff, who was an absolutely incredible modeler, passed away a few days ago. His main sort of interest was in free flight, although he was one of the early advocates of the RC indoor as well. He also had a great passion for German aircraft, and I remember I can't remember exactly what the aircraft was down in the bottom right, which was stolen from Mike Stewart's or from Lawrence Marks. But the workmanship on the aircraft of this size was incredible. You can see that in the albatross in the top right. And then I'll also say thank you to George Kandelakis stealing the superb photo of Peter in his element there, telling us all about his current project at that time, the Hanschel Salamander. So yeah, a great loss to the scale aero modelling community in the UK and all of us that knew him. So just have a few moments to think about Peter. Now, on more positive note, we had some good news on Monday. The Scale Indoor Nationals, which was postponed for obvious reasons in 2020, I had a very productive meeting with the events guy at Wolverhampton Uni, the Walsall campus. So we're pushing ahead with the organisation for it. Richard Crossley designed this poster. As you can see, we're keeping with the format or the planned format for 2020, with radio control classes on the Saturday and free flight on the Sunday. There'll still be time for free flight trimming on the Saturday evening. Mike Stewart is looking after all the entries for it. Mike and I are just finalising the finer points of the entry form, and then that will be available. There will have to be some alterations to how things are done, especially in the pits area on the Sunday in terms of the numbers. But I was very happy with the information that came back from the uni. It was a lot more positive than what I was expecting. So look out for the details, get the entries in. And obviously with the caveat of who knows what will be happening at that point. But anyone who would like to attend and help out on the judging side, then please contact either Mike or myself. And then on to the next one and the beginning of the presentation. So one of the new classes in the free flight side is no cal or no calorie. As I said, if we move to first slide, Roger. I'm a complete newbie to this. This is an old picture. Mr. Grimsley might recognise it. This was judging at the Jet World Masters in Israel some 11 years ago, so that's why I look an awful lot younger than I do now. But I thought it sort of summed up what I'm known mostly for, and that's being as a judge or team manager or contest director. But I want to sort of move away from that now that I've got away from the rat race in London. I've got a little bit more time. I've got a vehicle to move around. I've actually got a room to build in. I just need to stop getting involved in all the admin side of things. So the challenge for me is to make that move from coming out behind the clipboard to the other side. So the plan tonight is just to go through the basics of the no-cal class. It's something which wouldn't take much time at all out of all of our building programs to put together something, and it might be a sort of interesting, frustrating maybe at times as you learn the different skills, but very rewarding when you actually get something to fly. Okay, next one, Roger. So what is no-cal? It's a new class to the BMFA rules, but it is very well known within the US with the Flying Aces, and then it also has been flown as part of the IIFI event at Nijmegen in Holland for a number of years. And you'll quite often see no-cal models in and around your local indoor meets. As it suggests, no calorie, skinny profile, like the Avenger down in the bottom corner. They're very light, nearly always sort of stick in tissue, and they're built for duration. One of the main parts of a no-cal is it has to be recognisable as a full-size aircraft. Okay, next one. My two devices are running out of sync, so the main one that I'm working on is a little bit behind the other one. So let's just flick to the rules. So as per these are the BMFA rules. Is the maximum wingspan, sorry, is 16-inch. The minimum weight of 6 grams, excluding rubber. Rubber powered. They must have control surface outlines drawn on. It must have a full landing gear as well, so it's not a profile landing gear. Although aircraft with retractable gear could be depicted with the wheels retracted and drawn on. And then, of course, model must have a representative colour scheme and registration. No documentation required, no static judging. And then within the BMFA STC or scale tech rules, then there'll be a maximum of 6 time flights. Okay, Roger. And so the challenge in terms of what I sort of think for myself was sort of like choosing a subject. There are subjects that I particularly like, and I've had advice from a couple of the guys on here, one of whom I'm going to come to now, who owns the model in this picture, to give a little bit of sort of background as to what works well as a no-cal model. You've also, for those of us who have a mainly RC background, then this is a complete opposite way of thinking in terms of like wood choice, the weight. For myself, tissue covering, which I'll come to later. And then when I was doing my investigation on the various websites and everything, there's differences between like whether you use a motor stick or a rolled tube, the built-up propeller like Andy has here, and then trimming. We don't have the transmitter to intervene. But we'll go through some of the other subjects in later slides. But if I could hand over to Andy Sephton at the moment, just to give a little bit of background on like the suitability of racers and what to look for in a potential no-cal subject.
I'm with you. I've got to correct you on one thing, I'm afraid, Graham.
Go for it.
No-cal has been part of the Free Flight Tech Committee rulebook for some considerable time.
Sorry, I was just meaning within the STC rulebook. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
Apologies.
So it has been around in the UK, and in fact, this model was built for UK rules, which are slightly different to the rules in the. I think the rules in the USA have a minimum of 4 grams. I might be wrong on that, but ours are a little bit heavier at 6. It's a pure duration contest, and within the rules that were in place when this model was built about 10 years ago, you could make quite sweeping changes to the airplane, provided it still got the flavor of the original. So on this one, it's got a grossly elongated fuselage, a grossly increased tailplane size, a slight increase in wing chord to give it a higher aspect ratio. And if you look at the front, the propeller's sitting on the front of the spinner rather than behind it. So I've got the nose slightly elongated. But that is well within the rules, be it right or wrong. That's what they are. This is the second model I built to these plans. The original model had a laminated outline for the fuselage, which turned out to be quite heavy, and the rubber motor went all the way back to the tailplane. So it needed a lot of nose weight. So I ended up using a plastic prop to get the weight forward. This is the second aeroplane. The motor stick stops just behind the one behind the wing. You can probably see it in the shadow, which brings the motor forward, and the outline of the fuselage has been steamed to shape rather than laminated, which reduces the weight of the glue. The covering is Japanese Sasaki tissue that's been inkjet printed with the markings. And again, I chose the Whitman Bonzo because the markings are very simple. And really, that's all you need to do to get a flying model. There's a paper that's existing on the National Free Flight Society site, which gives you a lot of information on how to design and build the no-cal models for the competitions in the States, which the procedure works quite well for the models in the UK too. So that's it, really. With a maximum span of 16 inches, elongate your fuselage, increase the size of the tailplane, keep the motor well forward, extend the length of the nose, just make sure it looks roughly like the original airplane, and away you go. Do you need anything else, Graham?
No, that's fine.
It sounds a bit of a cheat, but it's a duration contest, not a scale contest.
Yeah.
You've got to make that sort of step shift away from scale models. It's not a scale model. It's a duration contest for caricature models.
Yeah, and in terms of myself, the reason why I've sort of to not take too much out of a building program with doing all the sort of different classes, for me, I saw it as a good way to supplement my kit scale entry, especially as Dad and I both intend to go to Nijmegen next November, and going there for the full weekend. It'll be a fun one where Dad and I can compete against one another. I'm looking at him to see what his reaction is at the moment, because Andy knows how Dad and I compete against one another.
Well, if I can remember the pair of you at one of the first radio control indoor scale competitions, and I came over to see you, and I said, "How are you getting on?" and you said, "I don't care how I get on as long as I beat my dad."
Yeah.
So,
It's 3-2, I think, in my favour at the moment for the indoor. Although I did steal his aircraft on one of the occasions and ended up finishing ahead of him. But anyway, I digress. Roger, can you pop to the next slide, please? So tissue covering, Andy's already sort of alluded to part of it there, and this is something that Dad and I had been chatting about in terms of the way to actually apply the marking. So as Andy suggested there, you can inkjet or print your tissue beforehand. But one of the main things is shrink your tissue, cut it oversize, and then the two different options I've sort of tried with are to apply the tissue to the actual structure, is either with like a Pritt stick or a Uhu stick, or a spray mount. So it'd be interesting to maybe come to Tim Horne in a second, to give you a little bit of warning, Tim, about how you've found, and maybe show your racer that you also have readily placed alongside you. And then the other thing to ask about in terms of adding the markings, like if you're actually applying them by hand, is it better with like a sort of like a colouring pencil, a felt pen, or what type of marker is it that tends to be used? So over to Tim. I did say I was going to put people on the spot.
Thanks.
Tim. Thanks, Tim.
Well, my markings, this is my chambermaid model. So another racer, fairly simple, as Andy said. The nice thing with this one is the chambermaid was a sort of cream color anyway, so it's just plain white Izaki tissue, which looks a bit cream. The markings here are done, as you said, drawn, just laid the tissue over the plan. I just drew the outlines with a fine pen and then filled in with a Sharpie. Very straightforward, nothing complicated. If you want to do more complicated things, there are some sites I mentioned to you, Graham. Best site that I've come across is by Paul and Ralph Bradley, PARmodels.com. And Paul has
I've got a link a little bit later.
Yeah, he has a list of about 10 or so, I think, mostly World War II scale or profile scale models, for which he provides the tissue printing files as well. So you can just print your tissue, lay it over the model and stick it on. Makes it quite straightforward.
This is actually an example from Paul and Bradley's page.
Oh, right, yes, the F1
the image there. Yeah.
What else to say about it? I think a slight addition to what Andy said about US, as far as I'm aware, there are actually 3 different scale classes or profile scale classes in the US. There's a heavy one at 6 grams minimum, or I think it's actually 6.2. There's a medium weight one at, I think, about 5 grams. And there is also an unlimited class. And the unlimited class, there's a paper that's been included in the latest STC newsletter by John Minchell by Don Slusarczyk, I think that's correct, who does a lot of scale modeling in America. And he talks about having profile models weighing between 1 and 2 grams. I couldn't build to that kind of weight personally. I'm just not clever enough with lightweight wood.
Out of interest, Tim, sorry, interrupting, what weight is the chambermaid?
Yeah, I was just going to come to that actually as an encouragement for those of you who probably are thinking that you couldn't build to that. sort of weight. This is heavy, very heavy. This weighs 10.2 grams, which probably doesn't sound a lot, but in profile scale models is a bit of an elephant, really. But I can still get 2-minute flights with this, which
Wow.
I am very pleased with. And I'm sure I could slim it down a little bit, but I tend to make my models fairly chunky because I'm always prone to handling mishaps, and I'd rather have something that I'm not going to break the moment I get it out of the box. Going back to tissue, one of the important things that you did say about is pre-shrinking the tissue. One of the issues that I always have with these models is flying surfaces warping, especially when you take them to a different place. I've taken this to the velodrome meetings on occasion and got it out of the box, and the wing has immediately turned into a pretzel, and it doesn't seem to like the different air. So I made a new wing for it, and I shrunk it with water, and then I shrunk it again with more water, and then I screwed the tissue up into a ball and then straightened it out and ironed it flat, and that leaves it sort of like a orange peel, crinkly, and hopefully that will keep it from warping again. But that does seem to be an issue, especially with tissues that shrink quite violently, like Izaki sometimes does.
That's one question I asked you at the moment. I said it was going to be interactive as you went along the learning process with me. But I was quite surprised to read when on the tissue covering for a no-cal that you don't want it really taut. You want it to be like a little bit saggy. Is that correct? So that is exactly as you said there, with the different atmospheric conditions, as that changes, it's not going to crack the aircraft, I presume. Is that correct?
Well, it won't probably crack it, but it will certainly bend it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely preferable to put the tissue on lightly and loosely. I put my tissue on with a Yoo-hoo stick. By that, there's the most straightforward. But yes, put it on so that it's a little bit baggy, and then it can take some shrinking. Okay.
Thanks for that, Tim. I might come to you in this next one as well, and Andy, as we see the way that the rubber is attached to the aircraft. But Roger, if you could pop on to the next slide. Oh. Sorry, I've just lost the, there we go. So yeah, the motor stick versus the motor tube. So part of the reason it seems to be that it's much simpler to apply the motor tube, and there's a fantastic tutorial on the website that both Tim and I have mentioned on how to make these motor tubes. Almost like you could say like a straw, but like a plastic straw would be too heavy. And the reason being, the motor stick, if you have one of those, it tends to make the aircraft warp, which means you would have like the tailplane at a completely different angle to how you want it when you're launching. And so by definition, it would make it very difficult to trim. But Andy and Tim, do you have your aircraft there just to show how you have your rubber attached to the aircraft? Andy?
Stand by just a sec. I'm just getting rid of the background.
There we go. Uh-huh.
Need to unmute. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a bit of plasticine on the front of that.
Yeah.
But there's a a pigtail bearing at the front of the aeroplane, and at the rear there's a motor hook.
Okay. Oh, you've muted again, Andy, I think.
Formally unmute. There we go. Is that rear motor hook coming through okay?
Yeah, can just see it sort of S-shaped.
That's the one. And there's an S hook at the front, just there, and a pigtail bearing that is very similar to the one that I did in Aero Modeler a couple of months ago for an indoor helicopter. So that will allow the propeller to be taken off the wound off the shaft. I'll try and demonstrate that depending on which way I turn it. There we go. So that if you want to, you can change the prop. It's a bit of a trick to bend the bearing, but I'll put a white background behind it. That's what the bearing looks like. There's a pigtail at the back and a ring at the front. It's made out of a single piece of wire. The propeller has an S hook on the back of it. Let's get that into a position where it can be seen. There we go. That's a better picture. And you wind it on and off, so you can have various propellers, various shafts prepared, and then put the one on that fits the height of the ceiling on the day. This model, by the way, weighs about 10 grams, the same as Tim's, and the maximum flight time I've had in a standard sports hole is 3.5 minutes. I can normally guarantee about 2.5 to 3 minutes, but the best flight has been 3. Over to you, Tim.
I'm hoping for 5 circuits. Once I get, in fact, that's my initial thing. I want 5 circuits, and then we can move on from there. Tim?
Mine's similar, some slight differences. There's the, can you see that? Yeah, there we go. There's the hook on the end of the back end of the motor stick. The stick itself is a rolled tube, which I think Graham's going to talk about later. The front end is a commercially available bearing, but I don't know where you can get them from now in this country. I used to get everything like this from Sam's, but I'm not sure whether VMC are up to sorting out what they've got from Kev yet, and I don't know whether they're going to continue doing indoor supplies like this. But this bearing is specifically made for indoor profile models, as it just attaches with some glue and some thread to the motor stick. Unfortunately, I can't remove the propeller as easily as Andy can on his, but the handy thing with this is it can be easily bent both ways to adjust the thrust line. So you can easily adjust for side thrust or down thrust without having to do anything except just pull it with your fingers. One other point just with this one is a bit of an oddity. I actually have a fully carved prop on mine. It needed a little bit of extra weight as well, and I can't remember particularly why I did it now, because I built this one so long ago. It's about 10 years old, but I think I was encouraged to by somebody else that I was talking to, and it seems to fly okay with it. I don't know what more I can say about that. So, Graham.
No, thanks. No, I'm not going to really say too much more about the paper tubes, because the tutorial on the website is really useful for that. But you've shown an example of it, so perfect. Doug, I know Andy's just answered your question there, but do you want to unmute and ask your question, just because it's quite appropriate at this point? We'll break with tradition and take a question as we're going.
Okay, Doug.
Doug?
I was interested by your comment, which made sense, Graham, that with the motor stick under tension from the rubber motor, if it was attached to the fuselage, then that could actually change the incidence angles and the angle of the empennage and so on and so forth. So I asked general question, would it be therefore better to attach the motor stick only at the front? Andy's replied and said, but you can't change the thrust line with only one support. I don't think that's quite what I'm imagining is a motor stick which stands free with his pigtail arrangement or Tim's titanium flat plate arrangement, whatever that is. So you can still adjust the thrust line, but the stick itself only attached at the nose end of the aeroplane. So the rest of the wings and the tail of the aeroplane isn't subject to the forces that the wound motor are putting on the motor stick. That was my question. Andy's waving at me.
Yeah, go for it, Andy.
Got to unmute first. There we go. Apologies, Doug. I thought you were just talking about the front mount. Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you just mount the motor stick at the front, then it's not going to affect the fuselage. But I use a solid motor stick. I don't use the tube. And I fly to the left. Most indoor flyers on duration of that type of model tend to fly to the right under power. I fly to the left under power, and the torque will twist the fuselage to go against the turn. So it helps me if it does twist a little bit. I think about it. No, I'm wrong. It goes with the turn, but I've not had any issue from a fuselage twisting affecting the trim.
Okay.
Just a quick question for Tim. I fly left when I fly mine. Which way does yours go?
I fly left as well.
Yeah.
I find that the rolled tube is actually very stiff, and effectively the airframe is just an attachment to the rolled tube, so to speak, and doesn't really have any effect. Mine's glued on the whole length, but I've actually used this rolled tube and prop arrangement on a couple of models, and I've just unglued it and stuck it onto another model, and I've made it a bit like taking an engine out of one aircraft and sticking it in a new aircraft. I don't find that the torque of a wound rubber motor has any particular effect at all on the airframe.
Yeah, I agree with that. On mine's a solid stick, and I've never noticed any twist if it does twist. But I've had no trimming difficulties at all. So
in terms of twisting anyway, and with one of my previous profile models, I actually used the indoor duration trick of an angled tailplane in order to induce turn, and so again, that didn't matter. The more it twisted, the better it turned inside the small hole that I was flying in.
Okay,
thanks, guys. Back to you, Graham.
So that's confused me. I can go both ways then. I can either have a motor stick or a tube. We might try both.
I think the issue might come down to the weights of the comparative weights of a rolled tube and a stick, Graham, actually, doesn't it? Because the tube is obviously very stiff. It's the best arrangement, but it's difficult to build. A solid stick is easy, but it's relatively heavier probably. And it's just a kind of a mix and match as to whether or not you want to go to the trouble of making the tube or and actually learning how to make the tube, because they're not necessarily that straightforward. Yes, that's right. So, but there must be a torsionally restrictive structure within the tube, which is probably not as great in the stick. So yeah,
it's
I think
all learning. It'll be interesting.
yeah, what I shall do, I think, is go for a stick to start off with and just get a bit more experience of it, and then perhaps then try and develop the tube rolling technique.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
I have to say, Doug, I think you're going into it with too much detail. I don't think it makes any difference except for the weight.
Yeah,
in
I think that's
respect
what I was meaning. Yeah.
I mean, as sort of shown with me in terms of detail, I want 5 circuits. If I get 50 seconds, then I'll be jumping around the hall. Not when others are flying to disturb the air, though. Next page, please, Roger. We've actually covered bits of this as well, and that's regarding the propeller. Sorry if I...
Sorry, Graham, I've got a bit of a hang-up on PowerPoint now. Hold on a minute.
It's okay.
Right. Apologies. Right, here we go.
Oh, there we go. So the built up versus the plastic prop. So we've actually, Andy and Tim have actually covered this in the various discussions that we've had there, where Andy sort of started with a plastic prop to begin with. That's where, because he needed the nose weight, that's the main sort of negative impact of the plastic propeller. But then sometimes you need it. And as we've seen with Tim's sort of carved propeller there in the chambermaid, then it actually adds quite a bit to the aircraft. This again is from Paul Bradley's website, a tutorial in making the propellers, where you've got the stiff, rigid central pivot, and then you can have either the various materials as the blades. I believe sort of Richard Crossley recently has been experimenting with yogurt pots. Is that right, Mike Stewart? Or is Graham Banham on tonight?
Yeah, I think on Richard's latest peanut, he's using yogurt pot blades, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And then next page, Roger. This just sort of links into, this is a few of the websites that I found really useful. The one which, as Tim suggested at the beginning, the Paul and Ralph Bradley website is excellent. There's a whole load of plans there. There's various tutorials on wood choices, etc. And then the other ones as well are very good resources if you're looking to find plans. But just a simple Google search of no cattle scale aircraft plans or whatever, and you can get plenty. And then always a good resource for anything free flight is the bottom one, the Hip Pocket Aeronautics Forum, to cover all aspects. I think it even includes some RC stuff as well. And then the final page, Roger, before we open up for questions, is just whether anyone else has been tempted to have a little go at this during the festive period. It's something you can sneak away to the building room for a little bit, put something together. The aircraft shown in this final slide here, a Tipsy Junior, is what I've decided to build. Dad and I are sort of regular visitors to Breeton Aerodrome in Yorkshire, so we've both decided to go for, well, based on full-size aircraft that's are resident there. So I'm going to do the Tipsy Junior. So far I've got as far as bending the undercarriage wire, but I'm off a couple of days next week, so we'll make progress in that. And Dad is doing a Piper Super Cruiser, where he's already done all of the basic construction, has been having interesting times dealing with such small pieces of wood, getting the glue joints in the correct places, Dad, myself, Chris Allen and Mick Henderson all got a flight in the Super Cruiser that was based at Breton. So that's why we're going that route. There we go. Nice and short tonight, as it was leading up to Christmas. I didn't want to take too much time out of your diaries with other commitments and things. But it's something just to plant an idea in people's head to maybe do build something different from what they're used to. And never know, when we meet at various indoor halls or at world championships or what have you, then we can have some fun and, well, laugh at one another when we're trying to trim. Thank you. Over to questions. Feel free as well if you want to ask any questions on the Scale Indoor Nationals, because it is sort of linked in. Basically, for the Scale Indoor Nats, I'm the overall organizer for the event, and there'll be sort of CD on both days. Mike Stewart is my assistant, who's taking care of all the entries as he has done in previous years. But as Mike's a very active competitor in free flight, I can take that aspect away from him on the Sunday. So open to questions now. Just go down through the chat window now that I can catch up. I think a number have been answered, but John Minshall, you've got a question which I guess sort of goes towards Doug and those, but John, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. It was just looking at the rule book, and you mentioned at the beginning about NOCAL having 6 timed flights in the competition, and knowing that they're going to be flown in the same overall time slots as Peanut and Pistachio, and they get 9 timed flights. I was just wondering the logic behind doing that. What was the thinking behind that? So I guess that's, as you say, is directed to Doug.
Yeah, the logic was that we were introducing a new class into a competition which was already stretched for time. So to include the flights during the Peanut and Pistachio duration sort of focused flights was the optimum way to go ahead with that. It may be, Graham, that when you're looking at the organisation this year, you might have to just allow a little bit more time in the Peanut Pistachio slots to accommodate some of these long flight times if we get a number of NOCAL entries from pilots who are also flying in the Peanut and Pistachio.
Yeah, I mean, Mike and I have already discussed that we'll look at the entries and then adapt and flex timings once we know
quite
exactly where we're going.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Question, I mean, because I don't have my notes in front of me, but Doug Martin Kinder's asking, does the 6 grams include rubber? I don't think it doesn't. It doesn't, yeah, that's what I thought. The rubber actually ends up, in terms of proportion, a lot of the weight, does it not?
Well, it should be about 50%, I would think. Andy's waving like mad up the top there, Graham.
I can't see, as I say, because I'm on like mobile devices.
I think he wants a comfort break.
Forgive.
I'd have taken one if I needed one. It was Adrian Hayward asked the question about how do you print tissue.
Oh, yes.
And I've got just for Mike Stewart, I have a vague feeling that you got a printed tissue tutorial on your website. Is that right, Mike?
Not exactly. I have got lozenge patterns on my website.
Okay, that's where I've seen them then.
Yeah, but I haven't got an actual tutorial on how to print those lozenges.
But it's a good plug for Mike's website with all the various techniques for whole manner of aspects. ffscale.co.uk. Is that right?
Yep.
There is a lot of stuff on printed tissue around. I mean, it's been in Air Modeler magazine. I think there's a lot on the net as well, Adi. So if you were to Google printing tissue for model airplanes, I'm sure you get quite a lot of help on that. I've done very little, but I know that there are certain, and I think Hip Pocket Aeronautics has got quite a lot on it. But basically, there are some inks which are waterproof and there's some inks which aren't. So you need to pick your printer and your inks if you want to do water spraying and so on and so forth. And generally speaking, you tape the prepared tissue onto a feeder card or a feeder piece of paper with tape at the leading edge, which will just take it through the printer. And it works pretty well. I've done it a few times and it seems to work all right, really.
I will add on that. I've got a Brother printer which has got waterproof ink, which is fine for printing. But if I put a tape on one end of a piece of tissue onto a leader paper, then I end up with a mess of blotting paper at the other end that's been screwed up and spat out. So I use photo mount, just a light spray of photo mount on a sheet of paper the size of the tissue that I want, and then just wipe the tissue down on that and then put it through the printer and peel it off immediately. So but I know that Peter Smart uses the tape leader method, so it obviously works on some printers, it just doesn't work on mine.
So it's experiment, isn't it?
Yeah. But it is a very elegant way of getting markings onto tissue, because you get your markings absolutely perfect on the computer. You can print it off a few times on a sheet of paper. When you've got it absolutely right, away you go. And for lozenge, it's excellent. And I don't know if you've ever been to Mike Stewart's website, but it's got some superb tutorials on building free flight models. But there's also, as Mike says, examples of lozenge tissue or lozenge patterns that you can print on tissue for First World War German airplanes.
Thanks, Andy. Just linking in with what Martin says, the next session on December the 23rd is just going to be a sort of like a social gathering, so no particular presentation. So that's my deadline for showing significant progress on not only the Tipsy Junior but other things. But it would also be a good vehicle as well for me to ask some more questions. So hopefully Tim, Andy and a couple of others are on board that night too. But yeah,
we've seen the Kennedy challenge. This is the Kinder challenge.
This is the Kinder one, another one.
Yeah, it's a great idea to see how many of us have achieved a bit of a model anyway. Well done, Mark.
Well, as I say, I've got my bent undercarriage leg currently. That's as far as I've got. The plan is on the board, but I'm going to put Paul Rich on the spot now because I got a message from him a little bit earlier. So Paul, is NoCal something that you've had a go at before? You said that you were quite interested in it. So what sort of subject are you thinking about? You still there, Paul? I can see you online.
Thanks, Graham. I was having real trouble on my iPhone unmuting myself. Yeah, thank you for inviting me to join in. Yeah, I'm quite keen on making an NoCal model for the Nationals next year in response to your challenge to SDC members. I'm actually in the process, Graham, and hopefully I'll have it finished to show everybody at the next meeting. I'm actually building a Hellcat from Paul Bradley's website. So the airframe's almost finished, and I'm in the process. I'm going into the office. Please don't tell Her Majesty's government, but I'm going into the office on Friday, and in my lunch hour, I'm going to use the big industrial size colour printer we've got there to print off my tissue. So yeah. I'm actively building a model as we speak.
There we go. Another good question from Martin. You can always depend on Martin. Just to add another aircraft your building program, but asking about biplanes. Do you want to unmute yourself, Martin?
Yeah, I was just trying to get an understanding of it. I've got quite a few questions because I'm quite a novice to this indoor duration lark. I've actually built a couple of indoor models. Neither have been particularly successful, but I did take part in the Scraps, I think it was a Scraps challenge, which was run by the Indoor Free Flight Yahoo Facebook group during the first lockdown, and I had a hell of a lot of fun with that. It's only about a 5-inch span. And I actually took this little model down to a school hall. I was doing a STEM day on the Wright brothers at my daughter's primary school, and I took it down there and just had a bit of a laugh with it, and then did 2.5 minutes. Wow. I was absolutely gobsmacked. This thing just bouncing around the ceiling at a 15 foot up in the air. So they do work, but there's something about 4 or 5 inches span. There's something a 6 inches span. A lot more area would be very, very different. But I was just thinking about scale models and something different. And if you're building something like a tiger moth, for example, it's not what I've got in mind, but a tiger moth, would you have to put things like struts on and stuff like that? The very draggy bits that's hanging off the wings.
I don't think the rules specify that, Martin, at all. I think what the rules are asking for is just something that looks like the full size. So if you build something like a tiger moth without the struts, then I don't think people are going to be grumbling at that. If you're doing something like, say, a beach stagger wing, which has really, really distinctive struts, then for your own personal satisfaction, you might want to include a representation of those struts. But I don't think the rules are calling for it. It's just really what you want to produce in terms of representing the full size. What I would say, though, Graham, is that what we've said, I think, in the rules is that if anybody decides to build a really obscure subject that the judges are unlikely to recognise, the judges would ask for, or the CD will ask for, just some indication of that there was actually a full-size aircraft.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, from my perspective, I'm looking to build a no-cow scale model, to learn new techniques and fly. I'm looking basically at the rules, but I haven't. Yeah, I'm not going into that much amount of detail.
No, but we saw at the last.
Then again, I'm picking a very simple model, so
yeah. But we saw at the last Indoor Nationals, one competitor turning up with a model who flew it upside down, didn't we, to increase his stability. And in terms of the no-cow, we would actually like to know it was a full-size aeroplane at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, I'm not sure if you can see that just in my phone there, Martin, if I get the angle right. But that's one that I must admit, when I was looking through, I'm quite tempted by, but I'm certainly not at that level yet. Now, do we have...
I mean, in terms of struts, let me just say something, Grant. In terms of struts, though, if you do have ultralight surfaces, Martin, on a biplane, then to square them up with a set of struts can actually help flying wise, because you can reduce the weight of the structure of the wings and rely on the struts to give you a little bit more stiffness. So that's one way you could go.
I was actually thinking along the same lines. I was thinking of actually using paper struts rather than wood.
Yep.
The idea is to pull the wings together rather than push them apart.
Yeah. And
then I'd basically hold two wings apart, more or less in parallel, I would guess. I wouldn't like to guarantee anything at this weight.
Yeah, and the rules specify conventional materials, and paper is certainly a conventional material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And the covering has to be tissue, does it? You can't use any high-tech films.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Personally, Martin, I'd build a monoplane.
well, it's 2 weeks to do this, and I'm very tempted. But if I was thinking of the wing loading, that was all. Getting the wing loading down as light as possible. You get a couple of big wings that have been stretched a bit in the cord.
Well, if you want to get the wing loading down, just increase the wing chord, because you can do that within the rules.
Fair point.
What I did on the Bonzo.
Do that twice.
Pardon me?
Do that twice.
Yeah,
But it'll be a challenge, won't it?
Yeah.
It's certainly adding to my building load, but I'm going to have a crack at it just for a bit of fun. I don't know about flying the damn thing, though.
That's what I think, just something that I can tick away on. As I've got my old uni portable building board has been set up with 3 aircraft currently, and it's sitting in front of what I call my shame area, in front of the TV in the lounge, because then I can't escape it when I come into the room, and so it forces me to go and do a little bit of building each night. So there we go. Chris, Alan, you've got a point or a question.
You need to unmute, Chris. You need to unmute, Chris. You need to unmute, Chris.
There we go. Right. Sorry. Yeah. No, the point's already been raised about who decides whether it is a genuine scale model, and as the definition says, it's got to be recognizable. So I just asked the question. Hands up those who recognized Andy's model as a Whitman Bonzo when they first saw it, because I certainly didn't. Now that doesn't make me I'm by no means an expert on these things, but I don't like to think that I often get these things wrong, and I know the outline of most airplanes when I see them, but I certainly didn't recognize. I think what threw me, Andy, was the fact the prop was right in front of the spinner.
Okay, hold that question, Chris, and I'll go and get a scale model of the Bonzo. I'll be about 5 minutes digging it out of the workshop.
Oh yeah,
and you can compare the two.
Yeah, well, I mean I know what a Bonzo Whitman looks like, but I assume your model is would it be the Mark II?
I think the thing, Chris, is that the rules are, it's really a duration class.
Yeah, I realise that.
Yeah, and the rules are really only asking for something which is representative of the full size rather than a replica. And it was, my comment was really aimed at the guys out there who like to, as I do sometimes, like to push the rules to the extreme and generate something which is so well, yeah, scale model, well, why not? Yeah. I think that's lovely, but in one of our UK competitions, I wouldn't say you can't fly that. I think that's great.
Well,
you can recognize it.
Yes, I say, except that we need to change the definition of a scale model then, because the word "that has flown" is in the current spec for a scale model.
So maybe there is a bit of a change that we need to input then on the no-cal rules, Chris.
Yeah,
we'll have a look at that before we put the final 2021 version together, I think.
Yeah,
I'm going to be happy when my actual no-cal flies, never mind if the full size is flown. So that's where I'm starting from. We'll start from there and then we'll progress.
Yeah, this is just fun.
But by the time I get to Walsall next year and Nottingham, Nijmegen, next November, then we might have something that can push the minute barrier. But yeah, my first task is to get it to fly.
Well, Graham, I've made a few easy bees in the past, and I am no expert at easy bees, but using that sort of concept, that sort of structure, you can get easy bees which are relatively robustly constructed to fly for several minutes. So you're going to be there, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll see.
Right,
we'll get there.
Just going to share my screen, if I may.
Go for it, Andy.
There we go. So it's disabled.
Oh,
Roger. Hold on a minute, Andy. I'll give you.
Thank you.
Screen sharing rights.
But yeah, you're absolutely right, Chris. it doesn't look like a proper bonzo, but
Okay, Andy.
what I've done to the model is within the rules that have been published for the American competitions.
Right.
That's not going to work, is it?
To me, Andy, the whether or not it looks like the full size really comes down to whether the fuselage shape looks right.
Well, I'll put the two together. Whether it will come up on that, I'll show you the models in plan view, and they're both 16-inch wingspan.
Yep. But
you can see that the no-cal has been increased in wing chord.
Yep.
Yeah.
The side view, I don't know, but does that show up?
Yeah, it does.
You can see that the no-cal has been increased in length quite considerably, and the fin size has been increased quite considerably as well.
It was the fin size and the nose that threw me.
Yeah, and the tail plane has been, the tail plane on the scale model has been increased, but the no-cal has been increased significantly.
Oh yeah.
But the thing here
is, if I slide them up, you can see the fact that the nose hasn't been increased that much, but the fact that the propeller's on the front of the spinner rather than on the firewall.
Yeah.
The thing here is the shapes look the same, Andy.
Yeah, well, that's
the thing. The shapes look the same.
It's not a scale model. It's a caricature model.
Yeah, quite right. Yeah, very good.
Representative.
That's the thing. I built this for a BMFA competition about 30 years ago for racers, and it just didn't race. It flies very nicely, but it just didn't go very fast. So it sat in its box doing nothing really. I ought to get it out and fly it again, oughtn't I?
Yeah, more welly.
There we go. Well, dare I say, it's too light to fly fast, and because of the low aspect ratio wing, there's a lot of drag. So when it turned around the pylons, it slowed down because of the increased drag in the turn. So as a racer, because when we had the air race initially, you had to build a racer. So I thought the Whitman Bonzo would be a goodie, but in fact it's not, because of the low aspect ratio wings. What you need is a high aspect ratio wing. And if you look at some of the models that do well in the air race at the indoor nats, you find most of them are high aspect ratio, which you've got less drag. So when they're going around the pylons, they fly faster. There you go.
Very good.
There we go. Has anyone else got any questions before we sign off for this evening?
Just one point. It's nothing to do with no-cal. I've been asked by Nav Jensen, can I help him out with some information on past World Championships? And he's got a few holes in his database and he can't fill them because he can't get to Lausanne to get to the FAI archives. One, they're too busy, and two, they're short-staffed and all the rest of it in the current climate. And now when I get my 1970 World Champs brochure back from Roger, sorry, Roger, I'll be able to fill him in on the details of the 1970 World Champs. This is RC, F4C, and control line. F4B, but I don't have any details on the later World Champs at Woodvale. And if anybody's got any info, or preferably either a brochure or a results breakdown, could they let me have it, please, or just email the details and I can pass it on to Nav, because he's got quite a lot of holes in his database. So it's an appeal generally for anybody who either lives in that part of the world, who has memories of it, and has kept some records of it. I didn't go to Woodvale. When was it?
78.
78. I didn't go, but I went to the 1971 at Cranfield, so I've got quite a bit of data on that and some pictures. But I've got nothing on Woodvale other than the fact that we in the BMFA have got the record, obviously, of the winners, but it's the details of the model that we need. We've got names, but very often we don't have the details of the model. So if you've got any information on Woodvale 78, then I'd be grateful if you could pass it on.
And Chris's details are on the STC website. Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Chris, just spookily, I posted them this afternoon to you. You'll have them tomorrow.
Bless you, kind sir. Thank you.
I'll put them tonight. I'll finish off with this. This is what we need.
We gotta do this for all the classes in Siam. It's actually going to present the winners from all the world championships.
Yeah.
And Narv volunteered to do the scale side, but the problem is that they have never been updated in Siam. So there is actually a lot of holes, even new ones. I can see F4H from Spain in 2012 is not there, and there is a lot of holes we have to fill out.
Yeah,
but the old ones is the problem.
I can fill in details of all the events I went to because I keep the records.
Yeah.
Those events I didn't get to, then as I say, it's a bit thin on the ground.
Yeah, but it's been some holes here and there, and Narv is the one with most of it on that you see his list. So you see there are holes everywhere.
Chris, have you done a search on the Error Modeler annuals and that sort of stuff? If you're looking for models and placings, is that a source of information?
I haven't, but it's a good call, Doug. Thank you. I will look at that. Error Modeler annuals. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I know it's in 78. I took a CO2 model of a Compa Swift and I trimmed it and flew it on the first day. This is free flight, not in the World Championships. This is a free flight model, and it managed to fly a long way down the airfield into the side of a caravan and demolished itself beyond repair. Now, I happen to have a model that I still fly these days, which was a Peck Polymers peanut model of a Piper Cub. And I flew that and came, I think, second in the free flight competition. But in talking to some of the radio guys there, I was talking to a Canadian chap called Steve Sorger, and Steve Sorger was flying at the 78 competition a Fairchild 24, you know, with the inline engine, beautiful model with a nice touch of a Playboy magazine inside the windshield. And I was chatting to him for about half an hour, and he did no more at the end of that than take out of his model box a complete set of his working drawings of the full size and for the model, and gave them to me. This was a duplicate set. Now, I've never met him before, never corresponded before, and I'd said that I had a great interest in building a free flight model, and he just gave me this stuff. And as a result of that, I built a 54-inch return gear rubber model of this Fairchild, got it to the point where it was about to be covered, and then got lost on another project. So it's still in my loft.
Yeah, right. Steve was a real advocate of the Fairchild aircraft. He was on the US F4C team for quite a number of years. Unfortunately, I think he passed away maybe 8 to 10 years ago, but he was a real fountain of knowledge. And when I first met him, he was very supportive of me being a much younger person getting involved. But yeah, I think in a couple of weeks' time at the Festive Social, we'll have plenty to talk about. But just one final question on the no-cal part, and it's something that Gordon Whitehead has asked. about that superb looking P38 that Roger showed. And it's talking about single covering. I think most no-cows, or really all no-cows, tend to be single covered purely because of weight. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Makes it simpler. It's the same. A lot of pistachio aircraft tend to be single covered. It's not a requirement for them to be double covered.
It's yeah, great. If they're only single covered and actually inkjet painted, does that not mean that the markings are on the wrong side of the fuselage, on the other side of the fuselage?
Well, because they're not statically judged, I presume you just look at it from the right side. Well, we'll say the correct side.
Left-handed, Graham. Unless you're left-handed, then you do it the other way. Because when you're launching it, it looks good.
But yeah, good point. Does anyone have any questions just about the scale indoor nats while Mike Stewart and I are both on? I know, Danny, you had asked me a question. We do intend having the air race classes again as well. The first time with the air race classes, they are on the programme. But as I say, it's all with the caveat of whatever state the country is in at that time. Right, next few, as I say, December 23rd is going to be festive social, so no fixed presentation. You can see how Martin and I are getting on with our no-cal projects. You've given me something. Dad might have his covered as well. He's almost at well, he's really at covering stage. And then on January the 6th, it's going to be an audience with Mr. Sephton, who has been modeler and full-size pilot, both like in RAF and with all his test pilot responsibilities for a number of years, we'll say. So it'll be your chance. We'll have a little bit of an intro on Andy, a few photos and everything through his life, and then it's an opportunity for you, maybe not to ask anything, but to find out, utilize his knowledge. Later on in the year, one absolutely superb one that Mike Smith has managed to arrange for the beginning of March is we have a representative from the RAF Museum coming on from their archive and library to show just what information is available to us as scale aeromodelers. But that's quite a coup. So we all have to thank Mike Smith for arranging that for us. And I think that's all from me. I can go in.
A little bit more from me, Graham, that
yeah, go for it.
The BMFA In the Air Tonight Zooms, they picked up on what we've been doing here, seen the success of what Graham's organised here, and they're running some parallel meetings for all of the air modeler disciplines. And on the 29th of December, one of the mugs on the STC, we're not sure yet, is going to be doing a peek into scale air modelling. So that's 29th of December, the BMFA In the Air Tonight meetings. You need to, inquire of any of us on the STC or Mark Benz on the main BMFA council to register for those particular meetings. But that might be entertaining on the 29th. Yep.
Thanks, Doug. I'm in work until 10 that night, so I may not make it unless it's quiet and I can log in from the shop floor.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
There we go. Okay, everyone, thanks very much for joining. Thanks again to Roger and also for sharing everything from my screen tonight. And see you all in a couple of weeks.